Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Shortly, we'll be voting on going to conference on the energy bill. Then later in the week, we'll be passing the CARA conference report, which cleared the House with only 5 dissenters. We'll also be voting on the Zika MilCon bill and to take up the defense appropriation bill. On MilCon Zika, I've talked to both the President and the Secretary of Health and Human Services. I've explained to them how the Senate and House work. A conference report is not amendable. What Senate Democrats are trying to do will not achieve an outcome. They want to apparently forget about the veterans and the military construction, resend a Zika-only bill to the House, which the House has indicated they will not pass. So if you want to get an outcome on Zika, funded at the level Senate Democrats have already supported, and you want to get the outcome immediately so we can begin to at least kill mosquitoes, the only solution is to reconsider the effort to stop the Zika MilCon bill, and I'll give our colleagues on the other side an opportunity to reconsider that later this week. Finally, once again, we're subjected to a roadblock against even taking up the defense appropriations bill. You recall they did it last year. They're doing it again this year. I've asked Senator Sullivan, a proud Marine and a member of the Armed Services Committee, to give you his thoughts about the Democrats using this tactic yet again to prevent funding for our troops who are in the field. The President just recently announced we're going to have more troops in Afghanistan. I agree with that. I think that's the right thing to do, and also that we're going to increase at a marginal level the effort that we're making in Iraq. So with that, let me turn to Senator Sullivan.
Well, thank you, Leader McConnell, and I'll just add to that a little bit. So some of you reported on this last Thursday, but a lot of you didn't, maybe because it's becoming so routine. But the minority leader, and unfortunately most of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, filibustered once again the defense appropriations bill. In the last year, that's the 4th time they've done that. So we're going to bring it up again. Hopefully they won't do it the 5th time, because I think when senators go home and tell their constituents what they're working on, filibustering defense appropriations 5 times in 1 year, they focus on that bill to filibuster it more than any other bill. 5 times. That's a really, really difficult vote to have to defend. So as the leader said last week, just in 1 week, what our military is facing, Secretary Carter yesterday, 560 more troops in Iraq. By the way, troops that are in combat. We know that. The White House doesn't like to say that, but they are. The President at the NATO summit, which a lot of us were supportive of, 1,000 troops in Europe, a headquarters in Poland. North Korea launched another submarine ballistic missile. President announced 8,400 troops are going to remain in Afghanistan. You may have seen what's going on in the South China Sea with this tribunal today. We had 2 carrier battle groups out in the region, 2 carrier battle groups. A lot of us, again, were supportive of that. So a lot's going on with our troops. What did the Senate do last week? Filibustered funding of these initiatives and others. And I think it's indefensible. Hopefully they're going to see the light, because I don't think any senator wants to go home and brag about filibustering, supporting our troops with funding 5 times in 1 year. But if they do that, then that's going to be hard to defend.
Well, just let me, I might expound upon something that the leader said, and that is that the Republicans in the Senate have focused on finding solutions, bipartisan solutions for the American people, and this week is no exception. We're going to be voting this week on a CARA bill, a bill that will combat and battle painkiller and heroin abuse in this country. We're going to pass an FAA reauthorization, which has the most comprehensive aviation security reforms in a decade. And in the wake of what happened in Brussels and Istanbul and Orlando and places like that, these are things that we need to be focused on, rightly focused on. And so those are going to be big bipartisan accomplishments and achievements. And there are a couple other issues that were mentioned that should be big bipartisan accomplishments, one of which is funding for the Zika crisis. There is no question about it that we have worked diligently to try and meet the President's request. The President said he wanted funding by July 4th. We did that by July 4th. His CDC director, Tom Frieden, said that $1.1 billion was the amount that was required to meet the immediate need, and we funded it at $1.1 billion. And so at some point you wonder if the Democrats will take yes for an answer. It's clear to me, at least on that issue, that they would rather have a political issue than to actually have a solution. And the same thing is true as, in what Senator Sullivan said about the DOD appropes bill. We've tried repeatedly last year and this year to get that bill on the floor. And repeatedly Democrats have blocked that. Now you would think, in light of what's happening around the world, as was already mentioned, the President has announced he's going to increase the troops in Iraq, going to slow the drawdown in Afghanistan, crisis points all over the planet, as Dan Sullivan pointed out, that the President and the Democrats here in the Congress would be working with us rather than against us to try and get the DOD funding bill passed. It funds our troops, it battles ISIS, and it addresses the national security requirements and needs that our military has to keep Americans safe. So that's what we're up against. Republicans are committed to getting solutions. We've done that we'll do that this week with FAA, with the CARA bill, and we would love to get bipartisan solutions when it comes to funding our troops and making sure that we're doing everything we can to combat the Zika crisis in this country. The question is, are Democrats going to be willing to work with us and address these critical issues of public health and national security, or are they going to stand in the way and continue to throw roadblocks? And I think we'll find that out probably the next couple of days.
Yeah, let me just add one other thing. I think one thing is perfectly clear here after looking at the previous Congress and this one. What our Democrat friends are best at is creating dysfunction, complete dysfunction. When they were in the majority, they didn't want to pass appropriation bills. When they're in the minority, they don't want to pass appropriation bills. And they look for a way to make it impossible for us to do the basic work of government, the 12 appropriation bills that are the discretionary accounts of our government, and they have completely balled it up. I gave it every opportunity this year to succeed. We have spent weeks and weeks and weeks trying to get a regular order process on appropriations through the Senate.
Leader McConnell.
I think the ranking member of the Appropriations Committee, you can ask her, this is her last year. She was anxious to demonstrate that the appropriations process could work. If you looked at the various bills that came out of the committee, most of them came out overwhelmingly supported on a bipartisan basis. So clearly there are a pool of Democratic senators who would like to see us function, would like to be relevant themselves to the process. The leadership, however, has no interest whatsoever. This is not spin, this is fact. You just look at the last 2 years. No interest whatsoever in allowing the Senate to function on what used to be, at its core, a pretty bipartisan effort. That is, to do the basic funding of the government. So they have succeeded now in disrupting the process, thereby guaranteeing, once again, we end up with some sort of indeterminate way of finishing the funding in a way that balls up the process.
Leader McConnell,
Yep.
did you, on Zika, there's other money in this account, and this was some of the arguments we did hear from some Republicans prior to getting this bill together, that there was money in Zika, in the Ebola account, that money was structured in a way that it could be used. At the end of the day, do you think it's really that big a crisis because there is money, and that was the argument that was used at one point to say, yeah, you could go into that fund and pull money out.
We already had all those arguments. We've had a conference. The conference has produced a conference report, which is not amendable. The time for debate about the content of it is over. If we did what the Senate Democrats say they want to do, we'd get no outcome at all. You'd strip the veterans out and the military construction out, send a Zika bill to the House that we know the House wouldn't pass, and so we'd leave here having done neither. So that does not resolve the issue. All of these discussions about offsets and the other issues were all carried out prior to the completion of the conference report.
Senator, how did you react when you read that the Justice of the Supreme Court said that it's time to move to New Zealand if Donald Trump is elected president?
Well, it seems to me that it's totally inappropriate for a member of the Supreme Court to be weighing in on an American election. It raises the level of skepticism that the American people have from time to time about just how objective the Supreme Court is, whether they're over there to call the balls and strikes or to weigh in on one side or another. So I think Justice Ginsburg's remarks were totally inappropriate, and I wish she hadn't said them.
Senator McConnell, are you going to be speaking at the convention next week?
Yes.
What will you focus your remarks on?
Senator McConnell, assuming the procedural vote this week fails on Zika, what would Dr. Fried and Dr. Fauci need to say to you to bring the Senate back over the summer recess on Zika?
Well, we could come back. We'd have the same issue before us. You'd have a conference report that's unamendable, and the issue would be whether or not the Democrats would let us pass it. In other words, reconvening doesn't solve the problem. If we come back, we're right where we are right now, next week, or the week after that, or the week after that. If we want to do something about Zika, we want to get right on the process of killing mosquitoes now, because we know it's going to take up to a year and a half to get the vaccine. This is the only way to achieve it. The House has spoken, the Senate has spoken, the conference report is before us. This is the way to address it, now or next week or 2 weeks from now.
Leader McConnell.
What's the White House reaction?
You'll have to ask them.
Leader McConnell.
Yeah.
What day will you be speaking at the convention, and what will your message be?
We'll have more to say about that later. I'll take one more if there is
When
one.
it comes to the Republican platform, they took out explicit mention of the TPP. Does that kill the chances that that trade deal could come out in the window? Could be passed?
Yeah, we've talked about the timing of TPP before, and I have said before, and I'll say again, with both the Democratic and Republican candidates for president opposed to the agreement, it's probably not the best time to be considering the agreement. And in terms of whether we will or won't look at it this year, I haven't made that call yet, but I'd say the chances are pretty slim that we'd be looking at that this year. For those who advocate TPP, it's important to remember the Trade Promotion Authority continues through the next president, and the agreement doesn't die at the end of this year. It's still out there to be considered or to be modified after the first of the year. Thank you.
Thank you.